Potiphar's wife, as the expression itself indicates, was the wife of a Pharaoh officer who ruled Egypt at the time when Jacob's son was taken there after being sold by his brothers to Ismaelites traders. It is true that the Bible does not say much about who was Potiphar's woman. Not even your name is mentioned in the biblical text. But despite being quoted briefly in the Bible, Potiphar's wife appears as a cunning, unscrupulous, lying, lewd, and without respect for her own husband. This is why the woman of Potiphar is always remembered negatively as an example of an immoral person. She attempted at all costs to seduce Joseph in Egypt, and when rejected, she invented a lie to harm him. And in this video, we will know everything the Bible says about who was Potiphar's woman. The story of Potiphar's woman is recorded in the Bible in Genesis. She was married to an important man in Egypt. Potiphar was a high officer of Pharaoh Cut. Even many scholars believe that Potiphar is the same commander of the guard, responsible for the jail where Joseph was later held. The name Potiphar probably means the one that the God has put on earth, was one of the main deities of ancient Egypt. Potiphar bought Joseph of Ismaelite traders who had taken him to Egypt. Then he took Jacob's son to his house to serve him as a steward. At Potiphar's house, Joseph was very blessed by the Lord and quickly gained his confidence. The Egyptian officer had so much consideration for Joseph that he took charge of all the matters of his properties. It was in this context that Potiphar's wife put her eyes on Joseph. She was attracted to the young Hebrew and asked him to lie with her. Joseph refused the invitation of that woman and still warned her about the immorality she was proposing. In fact, Joseph considered the woman's proposal of Potiphar as a great wickedness. Although ancient codes of the Old East law already condemned the adduced at that time, Joseph was committed to a much larger moral standard. For Joseph, giving in to Potiphar's woman's proposal meant not only to break legal codes, but to disrespect her Lord and betraying her confidence, and especially to violate the moral standard of God that demands from those who are his sanctified life. At that time, the Mosaic law that also condemned adultery had not yet been given, but Joseph walked with God and knew what his moral will was. Joseph knew that if he fell into that woman's trap, he would sin against God. But Potiphar's woman, quite the contrary. She insisted every day, inviting him to tamper with her. However, Joseph did not give in to the invitations of the woman of Potiphar. Apparently, he even left the main house where that woman lived. But one day, Jose had to go to the main house to take care of some business of Potiphar interest. That day, the house was empty, and Potiphar's wife took the opportunity to try to force Jose to lie with her. She grabbed him in the robes, but at that decisive moment, Joseph fled from there, leaving her robes in that woman's hands. Most likely, these garments were a type of cover worn over a base clothing. However, this time Potiphar's wife could not deal with Joseph's rejection. She took advantage that she had managed to keep Joseph's robes and formulated a false accusation against him. In fact, she reversed exactly the whole situation. She claimed that it was Joseph who tried to lie with her, betraying the confidence of Potiphar by not respecting her as the wife of her Lord. In the accusation against Joseph, Potiphar's wife used the term Hebrew in a pejorative way, in order to point out that he was a person of inferior quality. In this sense, in Genesis chapter 39, verse 14, she said, "Seated, brought us my husband this Hebrew to insult us." It is also possible to realize that, in a way, lightly she blamed Potiphar itself, because it was he who had taken Joseph to his house. And that woman supported her accusation until the arrival of Potiphar. Then she told him his lie and showed as proof of his false testimony to Joseph's robes. And Potiphar was very angry with Joseph and threw him into the jail. Perhaps because Joseph was a simple slave and Potiphar a powerful man in Egypt, he could have been executed. But God was working wonderfully to make all that evil and good. The truth is that the arrest was very important to Joseph. There he was put in touch with people close to Pharaoh, and all this prepared him for what would come after, when he became a governor of Egypt. As Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones said, "It is very dangerous when a person reaches success before being prepared for him." But in the face of all this, what we can learn from the story of Potiphar's woman, the truth is that this whole story shows us, on the one hand, the good example of piety and character of Joseph, and on the other, the immorality and evil of Potiphar's woman. Certainly because of that immoral woman, the environment of the pot of Potiphar was more dangerous to Joseph than the cistern in which she had been launched by her brothers. As the wise biblical author writes in Proverbs 23, verses 27 and 28 also, as a robbery teaches and multiplies the wicked. And in the same book, in Proverbs 5, we still learn that any immoral relationship can even start sweet as honey, but its end is bitter as poison. Potiphar's woman also characterizes that kind of person who does not treat others with dignity. That woman was selfish and only cared about her own satisfaction. She treated Joseph as an object that had to satisfy her whims. She saw Joseph as an insignificant being whose will did not deserve to be respected. That's why she insisted daily to disturb him. This story also teaches us that it is better to suffer for being whole than enjoying a moment of pleasure to be immoral. Potiphar's wife just wanted a moment of pleasure. But when a brief moment of pleasure means transgressing God's law, there is no pleasure that it can offset such a high price. Here, King David's life is an example of this. He was defeated where Joseph came out victorious. God forgave him, but he had to deal with the consequences of his sin. As Warren Wisby wrote, and then we can conclude by saying that Potiphar's woman is a typical case of a person without self-control, a person who is dominated by his own desires. But Jose, on the other hand, is an example of a person who has his own dominion to the point of being able to escape the passions of his youth. And if you like this video, leave your comment and share it with someone else.